Hi there, Christine Coral here for class 3 of Quieting Your Anxious Mind. And today's class is really going to focus on letting go of thoughts that you know you shouldn't be worrying about. So you don't have to challenge these thoughts so much. You already know that they're unlikely, but you just can't shake them out of your head. And again, at night, especially when it's quiet and there's nothing to distract you. So we're going to talk about letting go of thoughts and how to shift your attention, as well as acceptance, particularly accepting uncertainty, which is difficult for most of us who have anxiety. So before I do that, I want to take a little time to talk about some brain basics, so that you understand why your brain does this. It's just how we're built. Brains really don't shut up. Maybe that's the first point I'll put here. They're kind of always going, oh my God, we're all gonna die. It's terrible. And when we're on autopilot, that's kind of good because we, don't have to think to try and survive. The brain is automatically trying to protect us. And I explain this to a lot of people just so that they have a little bit more understanding and compassion for themselves, because we often beat ourselves up and say, I shouldn't worry about this. I must be going crazy. There's something wrong with me. And actually, no, when a brain's intact and working, sometimes it goes into overdrive, right? And if we feed it, then we really strengthen those areas of the brain that try and warn us and protect us. So we need to exercise and develop other brain regions that are going to help us focus our attention elsewhere. So there's a couple of ways I explain this. When, say you're wearing a ring or a watch, I don't wear a watch, but if you wear a piece of jewelry for a long piece of time, what happens is if you take that off of your wrist or off of your finger, what happens? You notice that you actually have the sensation of the missing ring or the missing watch or bracelet. And essentially what's happening is the part of the brain that's responsible for receiving that signal from your hand is saying, where's the ring? 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 And it almost goes a little, overcompensates a little bit. And we didn't feel the ring when we were wearing it, but when it's missing, we feel it even more strongly. Same thing with phantom limb pain, if any of you've heard of that before. So people who've lost a limb, either had it amputated or lost it in an accident, or even a finger or a part of their body, will sometimes have the sensation that that missing limb is still there. And what's happening is there's no arm sending a signal anymore, but the part of the brain that was responsible for feeling the arm is generating the signal. It's going, well, where's the arm? Where's the arm? Where's the arm? Where's the arm? And again, it will overcompensate, and sometimes people will feel pain. It hurts quite a bit. And when I used to work in pain clinics, I'd see a few people who had gone through an amputation and would have that kind of sensation. Now, the same thing happens with words, basically. And when we're talking all the time and reading and watching TV and listening to the radio, we're constantly stimulating the language centers of the brain. So when it's quiet, the brain goes, where are the words, where are the words, where are the words, where are the words? And we can't shut our brains off. Maybe our brains will be quiet for about 3 seconds. And when I teach the meditation class, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is one of the reasons why people think they can't meditate or that they're going crazy, because they can't turn their brains off. Nobody can turn their brains off. Well, maybe some people, maybe monks who've been in a silent monastery for 20 years, perhaps. I don't know. That's outside of my area. So if there's any neuroscientists watching this, you can let me know. But, I think it'd be pretty hard to turn your brain off when you're surrounded by people and working and hearing language all the time. Those regions of the brain are really, really overstimulated. Just like if you're wearing a ring on your finger constantly, when it's missing, the brain notices and generates its own signal. Now, the content that pops into our heads can depend on several things. So the brain will talk about anything. It doesn't matter. All kinds of crazy thoughts will pop into your head. But what will happen is, depending on your mood, like if you're sad, you'll have sad thoughts pop into your head, and we have all these associations between sad memories. And if we are happy, then we'll have happy thoughts. If we hear a song on the radio, that's why it triggers certain memories, because we remember where we were in 2002 when that song was on the radio. So it triggers that memory. So we call that state dependent memories, or we have some sort of context associated with it. So what we think about depends on what kind of mood we're in. So if we're feeling a little anxious or a little off, and we're trying not to think about something, then we're only going to be able to access anxious memories. So this is why, in the challenging your thoughts section, we spend a lot of time helping you remember evidence that goes against the thoughts that you're having. If you're already at that point where this is kind of silly, I shouldn't be worrying about this, that's when you want to work on letting go. But it's not just the way letting go that we think it is, like we stop thinking about it, we have to think about something else. So we touched on that a little bit last time when I drew the pink elephant. And I said, if you want to stop thinking about a pink elephant, then you're going to have to focus on a blue whale, and come up with something else. My 6-year-old saw that part on the last video, and she said, well, what if you don't want to think about a blue whale? So you can think of something else. She came up with a yellow bunny. She would rather think of a yellow bunny. So kids are fun that way, very literal. But in that sense, if you do have, a song stuck in your head, and a worry that you shouldn't be worrying about is very much like getting It's a Small World, After All, stuck in your head. You're going to have to think of something else. You're going to have to sing a new song and refocus your attention if you already know that it's not something that you should be hooked on. But not beat yourself up for it, because that's kind of how brain works. We all get these little things stuck in our head. So the more you practice, that's the main thing. The more you practice refocusing your attention, the better your brain is going to get at directing your attention to where you want it to go. Does that make sense? So it is something that comes with time, and I'll talk a lot more about this in the meditation class, because this is, I think, one of the key benefits of meditation is teaching your brain how to shift gears to where you want it to go. Plus, it's good for you in other ways, but I'll save some of that for that class. I like jumping ahead of myself. Can you tell I'm excited about this stuff? Because it's just too cool. But it really does help to understand that it's not you, it's how we're wired, and you have to be nice to yourself through this process. In fact, when I work with kids, we'll often, I won't necessarily draw a picture of their brains, but we'll draw a picture of a little creature, and he's got his hands up in the air, or they'll draw their own picture, whether it's a monster or dragon or something. And we write a list of all the things that their little worry guy says to them, right? And then what they can say back and what they can do to ignore the little guy in their head. And that's not a bad image for adults. With adults, we'll just say, well, that's my brain. My brain won't shut up. It's sending false messages. It's tricking me into getting hooked into these thoughts. And so that's what we want to really get good at over the next little while, and just be patient with yourself while you're learning how to do all of these different things. So how we go about letting go is, first we develop sort of an awareness. Actually, maybe I'll start with a new page here. So the sort of steps to letting go are developing this awareness. Oh, there goes my brain again. And you can make a list of different things that you can say to yourself. I do think it helps to sort of repeat over and over again, well, that's my brain, it's sending a false signal, I'm getting stuck. Like there's just something that shifts. We're using, actually, just by using awareness and watching what our brains are doing, we're using different brain regions, which helps. We can, like, the brain can only do so many things at once. So if you can bring awareness into the equation, it's actually quite powerful. It seems like you're not doing much, but the more you practice, the more you just simply bring awareness to it, even if you're not able to let it go, or say, I'm frustrated that I can't stop worrying about that. And so you're aware of the fact that you're frustrated, or why you're frustrated. You are starting to shake things up a little bit in how you're processing and using what we call executive functions. So we're using our higher brain functions to sort of start to override some of these primitive brain functions where we get stuck. So got to stick with it and have a little bit of practice. So the awareness alone is quite helpful. And then we know that it's not us. There's no blame. And we're working on, the next step is really refocusing. So with the refocusing, we want to pick something that is fun, something engaging, preferably something that uses different brain regions than the language centers. If you're really into a good book, sometimes that can work, but if you're like me, I find a lot of times if I'm reading, I start thinking I can read a whole page and realize I didn't read a thing because I had drifted off somewhere. I tend to find things that are visual spatial tend to work well because you can't think as well. So I like drawing and puzzles. I kind of made a list of them last time. Video games can be good. But there's not one thing for everybody. It's more important that it's something that you enjoy. So if you really get frustrated with video games, that's not going to work as well. And then if you do like video games, then things that usually require your total concentration, something fast-paced where you don't have time to think about anything else, because if your mind is elsewhere, you're gonna die in the video game. Those are kind of good. And unless you're really, really into it. Like some people love Sudoku and could do that all night, and that would take their mind off of a worry that was stuck for a while. But that wouldn't work so well for me. I get too frustrated with it. So you want to be able to not get sucked into the fear and sort of let go and refocus your attention elsewhere. Remind yourself when it comes back that it's just a thought. And if part of you actually believes that you can go back to the challenging exercises and go, well, this really isn't that likely, and I can see evidence for and against the outcomes. Remember some of the stuff we did in the last class, if you're believing it. But if you're not, then you just need to shift your attention and try and take your mind off of it somehow. And what can also help is being curious, not frustrated. Isn't it curious how my brain works? How I get stuck on these things, and why I get stuck on these things and not other things. And you want to try and keep that engaging. There was one time when just to show you the kinds of things that can pop into your head, and I knew not to worry about this, but there was one time where I was lying in bed and kind of falling asleep, and the thought popped into my head, what if the kids get eaten by sharks? There's no water near where I live. Unfortunately, there's no water near where I live, so there's really no possibility of my kids getting eaten by sharks. But I even got a jolt of adrenaline. I was kind of like taken aback, and then I started laughing because it was so silly. And so I could easily disengage from that worry because, I was aware that it was silly. And in that case, I didn't even have to refocus. It was just too ridiculous. That I just kind of thought it was funny. I needed my heart to stop beating. That took a few minutes, but other than that, I didn't really go in circles with that one because I knew it was just a thought, right? Very clear. Didn't have to do anything with that one. But it was funny. The next night, I had the thought, what if the kids choke on a carrot at school and nobody notices? So there's a little bit more to get me hooked in. With my OCD brain. That's another class. But when I have that kind of thought, I don't want to, when there's a little bit more truth to it, it's still just a thought. Nothing has happened. And I didn't want to stop putting carrots in my kids' lunches because it's one of the few vegetables that they'll eat. And I wasn't going to grate them because they're too big and they wouldn't want me to do that, so that wouldn't go over very well. And the thing is, they are well supervised. I think that would be very improbable for that to happen. So in that case, I have to remind myself that it's just a thought. But I thought it was kind of funny that, the one night I had this absolutely ridiculous thought and pop into my head. And then the next night I had an improbable thought to my head that I could have gotten stuck on if I didn't know better. If I didn't know that brains sort of plant these sort of seeds in your head, I would have gotten stuck. So I could easily say, bring my awareness to it and refocus elsewhere and try and do something to take my mind off of it. Very, very much like getting a song stuck in your head. So if that helps you. So, if you think of some of the strategies that you do then when you have a song stuck in your head, you need to refocus. But you don't want to engage with it. You don't want to give it more life than it deserves. Okay? Does that make sense? So it's very simple, but very difficult at the same time. So really, I'm going to emphasize, you have to practice. Really, really have to practice this. You get better at finding what things help you disengage, what thoughts are easier to slip away from. You get better at just bringing awareness to it. Sometimes we get caught off guard. Just this is one skill, and then this is a separate skill. And then even actually these two are also skills. So you're going to develop each of those separately and become better and better. And once you have all of those skills in place, then it gets easier and easier, where you don't believe anything you think. I don't believe anything I think anymore. So it's quite helpful. And when I do, well, actually I shouldn't say that. Sometimes I'll get stuck on a thought and then I'm mad at myself because I'm stuck on a thought. So that's usually where it is. And that takes me a little while to disengage from it. So the longest thought this year was actually like a week. I was stewing on something. I was like mad at myself that I'm like, I'm a cognitive psychologist. I should get, but we all get stuck, right? So, practice, you get better and better. So, most things I can disengage from in 30 seconds or less. So life's much easier now than it was when I was in my 20s. That's for sure. Okay, so now let's go on to part 2. And in today's class, it's going to be on acceptance, but in particular, accepting uncertainty. Big one for most of us. What happens is, remember the positive beliefs about worrying last time. We talked a bit about, how if you have the belief that it's responsible to worry, you're going to be stuck. Well, it's the same thing with sort of uncertainty. If we have, I can't take not knowing, I can't handle not being absolutely certain of the outcome. If I do this, then I want to know then that will happen. So we want to know if we put effort into something. If I go to school, I want to know that my grades will be great and that I'll get a great job after, and I don't want to take any chances here. So, and if I write a book, then I want to know that it's going to be good. I want to know it's going to be a bestseller if I put all that effort into it. And so those are the kinds of things that can really keep us stuck. So we need to look at worrying and use the same strategies for accepting uncertainty that we do for other kinds of worry. So we're either going to challenge it or let it go. Okay. So let go of our need for uncertainty or need for certainty. So I keep wanting to put need for uncertainty. Now I have a need for uncertainty because actually it's kind of fun to not know. I mean, you don't want anyone to spoil the ending of a movie for you. So I have a need for uncertainty. These days I have a very low tolerance for boredom. So apparently that's why I'm doing podcasts and things like that. So I like a need for uncertainty. But what we need to do is challenge when we're stuck. We need to let go of this need for certainty. So one thing that we do is when we look at when we worry, it doesn't really increase predictability. So we want to keep that in mind. The more we worry, the more you worry about a test, it doesn't really predict how well you're going to do on that test. So you want to really realize that that worrying doesn't really enhance that. What am I trying to say? It doesn't really improve any chances of a better outcome in this case, and so it doesn't really help us figure out what's going to happen. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So we end up, wasting more time. When we're trying to do that. So very much like the same thing. So actually, maybe I'll do this a different way. This is why I'm getting stuck. So you can see I'm doing this on the fly. So when we challenge our need for uncertainty, what we can do is look at the pros and cons. So why don't pick an example? Why not? I need to know how I'm going to do on this exam. Okay, so we'll use the exam as an example. So what are the pros and cons of knowing that you're going to get an A, or worrying about getting an A, and not wanting to take the course unless you're going to do well in it? So the pros are, I'll study hard, and I don't know, I'm having trouble thinking of pros. Sometimes that's why it's easier to do role play. So I'm looking forward to the live Q&A when you guys give me some examples. I think knowing for sure how you're going to do in a class. I mean, one way to know that is if you take a class a second time, then like if I already had an A, then I know I would get an A. So if I had an A last time, I know I would get it again. If you had the same instructor, sometimes a different instructor will mark you differently. But other than that, there aren't that many advantages to knowing exactly how you're going to do in the class. Most of the cons are is I waste time worrying about it instead of studying. There we go. It would be boring to take the same class over again. Or if the class is just too easy. It's probably a better example. Because, if we, repeat a class, or we take a class that we know is an easy A, then we're not really stimulated. We're not really engaged in the class. We're not sort of expanding our knowledge base that much if it's too simple for us. Even sitting in a workshop that is too easy for you can be a little boring. Sometimes boring is good, if you've got a lot on your plate and you're in university and you have other classes that are challenging you, but even then, I'd at least like the class to be interesting and easy, but usually those often for me haven't gone together. I don't know about you. And some of the other cons are, life doesn't work that way. And you miss out on a lot. And the fun of not knowing. If you go out on a first date, it's part of the fun is, does he like me? Does she like me? And having something to anticipate as well. So there's certain upsides to that. But generally, when we're talking about a class, it's pretty dull if we do the same thing over and over again. And then it doesn't really feel like an achievement if you knew that you would have an easy A, that you could just sail through it. Okay, so there's some examples. So that's one thing that you can do when you're looking at a particular area that you're worrying about. I don't know how I'm going to do in this course. I don't know if I'll be healthy. I don't know if I'm going to get married. I don't know if I'm going to have children. I don't know. You could come up with all kinds of things, whatever it is that you're worrying about. And usually most of us who do worry have some pocket, some area where we really have a harder time tolerating that uncertainty. We want to know. I think that's why people will go see psychics and want to know, but I'm good not knowing and having some of the excitement, or just being uncertain about what choices that we make. That can be hard too. Especially if we only made the choices that we know we had a higher probability of going a certain way just because they were probable, then again, that's not always fun. We want to make the choices that are right for us, not sort of based out of fear. And often that means like sort of quitting school. It's easier to quit school than worry about whether or not you would fail school. You end up in the same, it's still a choice, right? But it feels like we're moving out of it. So one thing that you can do to help you tolerate uncertainty, so after you've done this sort of pros and cons of requiring certainty in a particular situation, you can list, where can I tolerate certainty? Oh, tolerate uncertainty. Sorry, I keep doing that. I guess for me it is tolerating certainty because it's boring if I know. Okay, so where can I tolerate certainty already? So in this case, I guess that's a question mark. Some people, well, there's different things, right? So if you need to know the outcome of an exam, what are some other areas? Some people, I don't worry about whether I'll have kids. Or if I get a better job. Or if I'll get sick. So there's definitely like a whole list of other things that other people worry about that you don't necessarily worry about. You can even sort of think of your friends and family and some of the areas that they get stuck and see that, that's not as much of a problem for you because you don't worry about those same things, even though they're pretty common. Like I can't even really think of anything that nobody worries about because somebody out there does worry about it, but just not you. So make a list of those other areas, where maybe your friends and family worry more, but you don't. And sort of remind yourself of that so that you are able to cope with that uncertainty. So even when you have these other areas, that's one thing you can do, make that list. And then the next thing that you can do is, how can I cope with uncertainty? And maybe I'll do coping with uncertainty. How could I do that? So you can look at how other people around you cope with uncertainty, and as well as how you're able to cope with areas where you don't have an answer. So, does that make sense? So look at your own strategies and the strategies of people around you. I can do things to take my mind off. I can talk to a friend. If you're stuck on it and you want to let go, watch a funny movie. I can be grateful for the practice. How you talk to yourself about it can change a lot. So, not everybody's there. I don't say you have to be grateful for everything that comes your way. There's certainly things, I could do without. I could do without colds, but, when they come, then I'll be grateful for practicing being able to tolerate, physical discomfort. And it's an opportunity to practice some of those things. So when you look at it that way, you don't really get through life without some uncertainty, without some disappointment. And so when those opportunities come up, if you look at them as a chance to get better at this sort of thing, then it can be, oh, cool. I don't have to run away from it. I'll be able to handle it. I want to practice this. I want to get better at this so that when I don't know, do take on a job as a high-powered executive, I have those skills in place, or whatever it is you want to do. That's cool. Usually anything that you want to do that's kind of cool will cause a little bit of anxiety and stress. So if you can practice on smaller things, then that's great. So, and then remind yourself, worrying doesn't increase predictability. And, even look at how often do my predictions come true? So if you have a lot of sort of thoughts about uncertainty that are tripping you up, look and see how often your thoughts in this area come true, especially around school or job or any kind of career advancement. We don't know how things are going to turn out. We don't know what direction our lives are going to take, and we don't know, even if things are good things or bad things. I mean, there's been times in my life where I thought, oh great, I've got this wonderful job, and one job in particular I thought was my dream job, and it turned out to be more of a nightmare. So I would have predicted that it would have been great. I was excited about it, and it really wasn't a good fit for me in the end. So I had to change course. So I've just figured I can't predict anything. Everything that I think is good is often not, and everything that I think is bad is often better than I think it is. So you don't know until you jump in and try. And so actually that's one of the main advantages to not requiring certainty is if you go into any situation saying, I don't know if this is going to be good or bad, then we're more open to noticing whether or not something is a good fit for us, for someone's a kindred spirit or not, and we don't get as caught up. We I don't know, how do I put this? It's more like we can have fun with it. It's more like a game. It's more like playing. We don't really have to have things work out in a certain way that, things never work out as planned anyway. So if you can get comfortable with that, then you're more open to kind of going with the flow and just responding to things without getting caught up in it. So, and so when you're sort of caught on this, so you can, that's more challenging your ideas about uncertainty, and that we don't really need it, that we don't really need to focus on the uncertainty the way that we think that we have to. It's not that important. We don't require certainty. Long way of saying that. Okay, so when you're in a situation where, say, you are nervous about an exam, what you want to be able to do is to focus on it, and maybe you could even think about, well, how would you cope if you did fail that exam? And then you have to jump into studying. So, I've always been able to study better when I haven't worried about whether I'll pass or fail, and so if I fail this test, then I'll have to rewrite it. Especially, it's harder when it's a big test and, people are waiting to see if you pass, like licensing exams. I certainly see a lot of accountants and lawyers and other psychologists have to go through these big licensing exams, and they're nerve-wracking, and, everybody knows that you've studied months for them. So if you fail, it feels like a big deal. But if you do, you write it again, and you're not the only one. I mean, the failure rates on a lot of these things are pretty high. So once you've gotten to this point where you figured out it'll be okay if I don't do well, or I can, I'll have to live with uncertainty in this case, and it's still there, it's still bothering you, then that's when you're going to have to shift gears and focus on something else. So, you want to come up with your coping plan. Okay, for what you're going to do. I think the biggest thing is, be kind. So sort of self-compassionate, self-talk. So what do I mean by that? Well, mostly we feel that there's something wrong with us when we're worrying, when we're stuck on something. So what we want to do is be nice to ourselves. So it's okay to be anxious about this. And, certainly when I used to work in a cancer center, a lot of people would come in and the first thing they would say to me is, I'm not coping very well with this. And they felt bad about that, and everyone was telling them to put on a brave face and be positive. And, what the research really shows is you don't have to be positive when you're going through cancer treatment. It doesn't really improve your outcome. In fact, I think you waste a lot of energy trying to be positive. It's okay to feel what you're feeling. And when we're going through a tough time, if we're having a hard time, say, like we're wondering about the outcome of our cancer treatment, we don't know whether the chemo will work or not. There's a lot of uncertainty when you have a physical illness. And if you try and think you should be handling it better, then you keep yourself stuck. So you really want to, this is probably the most important thing. that you can do with anything that happens to you is to be nice to yourself while you go through the process, and tell yourself it's okay to have this. It's okay to be anxious. It's okay to worry about whether or not something's going to happen. And when we take that pressure off of ourselves to, I don't believe in sucking it up. We should never, ever suck it up. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. It's a waste of energy. It's a waste of time. And so what we want to do is not run away from these feelings. There's a reason why we have, I don't really like to call them negative emotions, but the uncomfortable emotions. Because they're there for a reason. They tell us when we're stretched or when we're tired. And so, if you can even, Christine Badesky once said to me, you could, just remind yourself you have a bit of the psychological flu. I kind of like that term. So what would you do if you had a physical flu? You would rest and take it easy. And, eat nutritious food if you could keep it down. But it's kind of the same things, that you wouldn't try and do everything that you could do normally when you're stressed and anxious about something. So you want to be kind to yourself. So that could be part of your coping plan too. Okay, so while I'm nervous about this, I'm not going to try and do everything that I used to do when I was well. I'm going to take it a bit easy on myself. Actually, when I had cancer about 5 years ago, I was working in a hospital, and I felt like I was kicked in the gut. So I didn't try and see all my patients. I didn't try and keep up with with my regular workload. I kind of switched things around so that I could work from home a little bit more. I got groups ready. Other people took my clinical load off of me because I didn't know when I was going to cry. So not really helpful if your psychologist burst into tears. And I'm fine now, but not really helpful when your psychologist bursts into tears in the middle of a session. So I knew, that doing sessions was, harder for me at that time. So I took it easy on myself, and I picked up the slack in other areas for people. I did more sort of admin stuff where it was okay if I burst into tears at any time. But, oops, sorry, my chair got away from me. And so I was kind to myself while I did that. And I also knew that I wasn't going to force myself to suck it up. If I had a feeling, I was going to let myself have the feeling. Okay? So that's part of the big thing with accepting uncomfortable emotions and accepting situations that we don't like. It's not fighting it. It's practicing this concept of non-resistance. Notice how I said practicing non-resistance. Right? You do get better with it at times. So, it's not because you're not suffering because things are uncertain. You're suffering because you don't want them to be uncertain. So you at least accept the fact that you're having trouble accepting uncertainty. So you take that step back, and that makes it a little bit easier. And then, then there's the basic strategies for taking your mind off. And what's mind off the worry. It's a good idea to write these down and put them somewhere, because when we're worrying, we forget. So I always like making a list, and you can stick it, even on a little card, stick it in your wallet, stick it in your purse, stick it in your pocket, somewhere where you can read it easily, and you can think of all the things that you can do. You could even call a friend. But I even like it if you have specific friends. Joe, Jill, Karen, etc. Right? So then you know who to call in that moment. And they don't have to be friends. They don't really have to talk to you about what you're worried about. They can just talk to you about the weather or distractions, or, I thought I'd call and say hi. Not all friends are, want to hear everything that we have to say, or some friends are better at giving advice than others. Sometimes we don't want advice, so we call a friend that doesn't want advice. Go for a coffee, go for a movie, chat on the phone, watch a show, get engaged in something, but write down what works for you, and that will help shift you out if you're stuck sort of wanting uncertainty and you're not going to get it in that instance, which is most instances, quite frankly. And remember that, even if your worst case scenario comes out, it might not be as bad as you think. So you want to do your challenge your fears about the worst case scenario. Okay, so remember, practice makes perfect, and all of these are skills that you're going to get better and better at. I certainly have not come to these naturally myself, and I keep getting better and better at them the more I practice them too. So hopefully nothing will get under my skin soon. Hopefully, we'll see. But certainly, I'd say like 80% of the stuff that I worry about 20 years ago, I don't worry about now. So, and I'm a slow learner. I'm sure you can do it much more quickly than me. But it's this idea that it's practicing and you get better at challenging yourself. If you're really stuck, then it could be a good idea to see a cognitive therapist then, because, or even, if you have a friend who is kind of clever that way and wants to do the pros and cons list with you, it's always easier to help someone else than ourselves when we're stuck in the middle of something. So, or even if you're stuck, you can imagine, well, what would I tell a friend who is going through this? And that gives us a little bit of distance that often we can come up with new solutions then. But if you're really stuck with this, because it does take a bit to learn how to do this, some of you are going to take this and run. And, now that you have the tools, go with it. But most of us are going to need to practice a little bit more. And some of us need some coaching with it too. So don't worry about that if that's the case. Find yourself a good coach in a cognitive therapist, and they can help you get better and better at this and sort of find those pieces of evidence, because it is hard. When you're very anxious, it's hard to remember the times when we cope well. It's hard to remember when things were okay, sometimes when we're on our own. So have fun. So the next class I'm really excited about. Now the next class is really going to be not so much what if, it's going to be when there really is a problem, like you don't have money to pay the rent and you've just failed a course and you're not sure what's going to happen next, or, so you have a problem that you have to overcome. Got fired, laid off. I'm not meaning to smile if you got fired, but do you know what I mean? Like it's those kinds of thoughts where you do have something to tackle. You've got a real problem to tackle. So we're going to talk about problem solving and the difference between problem solving and worrying. And sometimes it's productive worrying versus unproductive worrying. It can be the distinction between problem solving and worrying. So that's next class. I'm excited because that's a fun one too. So happy practicing, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.